I was a scared little kid. I was getting picked on. I was getting bullied, all that stuff. And I gravitated toward monsters and sci-fi and things like that.
Did you have anyone, whether in high school or in college, who saw your potential? And
the two of them, her husband was a computer science teacher, and she was the art teacher at the high school. And after college, I went to her and I said, "Look, I can't get a job. I have no computer experience." And she said, "Well, my husband teaches computer science. He'll show you how to use Quark Express and Adobe Illustrator." And
like, it was your nature that led you on your path, right? Like you always had an interest in tinkering with things.
Yeah, it's all just that tinkering, that imagination. How do I like to tinker, and then I have this imagination. So it's like, hey, let's take this thing apart and figure out how to do it in a new way. Oh, everyone's using it like this. What if I did this? And I said this to the Epic Artists one time, and they had a shit bit. But I said, look, I'm order through chaos. I scribble on a painting, right? And look at what shapes come out, and then I refine those and pull the creature or pull the subject out of that painting. That's kind of how I create art. And when AI came on board with generative AI, it's kind of a roulette wheel, and I took to it kind of like a fish with to water.
So welcome back. This is a new episode of Coffee, Matcha, and Soul. Today I am covering for Guillermo and Zaire. Unfortunately, Guillermo and Zaire couldn't join us because they're in the middle of a big project that's been keeping them away. But I've been trying to get this guest on for the past 2 seasons, actually. And so I'm really excited to finally have Chris Perna on. Those who've played some games like Gears of War, Unreal Tournament, Fortnite probably have heard the name of Chris Perna. Chris Perna was the director of art worldwide studios for Epic Games for 22 years. So he oversaw the art of many of these games. And so I've been dying to talk to Chris about his process as an artist. I've had the opportunity to meet Chris a couple of times and get to know him. And I just think his story as an artist is incredible. He always, basically, from what I understand, pursued what motivated him, what drove him, his passions as an artist, and it led him on this like incredible career journey. And so I think for our artists out there, it'll be really fascinating to hear Chris's story. So thank you so much for being on, Chris.
Oh, you're welcome, Saro. It's great to be on. Thank you for having me.
Oh yeah. I'm really excited for this. I'm glad we're finally doing this.
Yeah, it's cool.
Chris, just out of curiosity, I have my matcha here in front of me, but what do you drink? What's your drink of choice? Coffee?
I drink water.
Water.
Yeah. I am naturally in the red, so if I have coffee, I'm like, I just vibrate.
Really?
Yeah, and I won't sleep for like 3 days. So yeah, it's I'm just pinned, man, all the time.
Wow, amazing. So let's start a little bit. Like, how did you get into gaming? You told me a little bit, but I think people are going to find this story really fascinating and amazing.
Yeah, so it's kind of a story, right? We'll start when I was young, because that's kind of the inspiration for all of it. I was a scared little kid. I was getting picked on. I was getting bullied, all that stuff. And I gravitated toward monsters and sci-fi and things like that. I think Star Wars kind of set me on that path in '77. When I first saw that in the theaters, that just kind of expanded my mind. And then,
how old were you, if you don't mind me asking?
Well, I was born in '69, so I was probably 7 or 8 years old or 9 years old.
Okay. Wow. So yeah, I'm sure Star Wars must have blown your mind at that time. Right?
I had never seen anything like it, right? So it just, holy mackerel, this is so cool. So that opened my mind to all these possibilities. And where I grew up, it was the East End of Long Island. So we were in the woods like all day, right? And it wasn't like today. As a kid, you'd go out at like 8 a.m, right? And you'd build forts all day and we'd explore and BB gun fights and all this stuff. And your imaginations were allowed to run wild. So I saw Star Wars, and we'd go out in the woods and play Star Wars, and we played Army and all this stuff. So it just turned out, looking back, it was just all fertile ground for imagination and imaginative storytelling and play and all that stuff. Um, so I had a great upbringing that way, but I was plagued by anxiety. I was plagued by anxiety and nightmares and night terrors, and I'd wake up in the middle of the night screaming, and I just had this unflappable like feeling of dread in the middle of the night sometimes, and no one can console me, nothing can get rid of it, and that really took hold at a certain. I was young, I was around that 7 or 8 years old, something like that. So later on, when I would go to school, I would have that same feeling. When I sat in a classroom and that door shut, I would get terrible anxiety. What if I can't leave? What if I have to go to the bathroom? What if I feel sick? And I'd start to feel nauseous, and it was all just anxiety, stress related nonsense. But what I did with it, I withdrew into myself and literally started to draw. And I would sketch things, and it was mostly my anxiety that I was sketching, I guess, because it was monster stuff, right? It was all monster, Frankensteins and witches, and I just started to draw, and as a consequence, I never really learned. Turns out, as I get older, I'm kind of got ADHD, obsessive compulsive. I've got a bunch of crazy in me that kind of made me that way. But it's a blessing and a curse. The blessing is that the only thing that could focus it and take that anxiety away was art. And I would draw, and I would paint, or would sculpt, whatever I did, I could get rid of that and lose track of time and everything, and I would just focus all those voices in my head down to a single vision. So I kind of took that, and my dad was a my dad was an athletic director. He was like a sports guy, right? So a little Italian guy, kind of angry all the time. He'd come home from work and, what are you doing? He was a wrestling coach and a football coach. So he was, he didn't understand art. He didn't understand what I was doing. This is fantasy. He would tell me this is not going to go anywhere. And so he kind of drummed that into my head. And then when I would go to school, like as I got on senior, I had a portfolio, we'd go to portfolio days. I'd go to show my work, and they'd laugh at me and be like, what are you going to do? Heavy metal album covers? I was emulating artists like Frazetta and those guys. So it was discouraging, and I didn't know what to do. So I listened to my dad, and I also wrestled. I was always caught between two worlds, right? I was an artist and also a jock. And my art friends didn't really like my jock friends, and vice versa. So I kind of felt homeless. I was in between these worlds. But I was good at wrestling, and I got a scholarship to East Stroudsburg University, which was Division I wrestling. And my dad was excited. I was kind of meh about it, but I went anyway. And I went for sports medicine, athletic training. I wrestled for a little while there, and it was not a good experience for me. I was young. I was probably 17 or just 18 when I started college, and I was wrestling against men who were 20, 23,
Wow.
stuff like that, and they were just so much stronger. Even though they weighed as much as me, they were just so much more. So I got my ass kicked all over the place. Not fun. So I just kind of was like, I want to do art. I don't want to do this. So to my parents' credit, they said, okay, well, what can you do in art and make money? How are you going to make a living? And said, well, I can do graphic design. Let's do that. So I went to FIT in Manhattan. I transferred. I went there. I did an associate degree there, and that was fun. I mean, the city was amazing. The city, being in Manhattan, that was kind of an eye-opening experience for me. It brought me out of my shell. I didn't learn anything. I mean, I learned a lot about typography, about graphic design, film production, things like that at FIT. But when I got out and I started to go on interviews, all I had were marker renderings and drawings of page layouts and things like that. And I'd take these on my interviews, and they'd be like, "Well, do you know what an apple? You know how to use an apple?" And I was like, "I know how to eat an apple. I don't I don't know what an apple is." So I got a little discouraged there. I went on countless interviews in Manhattan to advertising agencies and the like, and small boutique studios and stuff. And they just, you got to know a computer. What are you doing? So my high school teacher said, "Hey," I was talking to her, my high school art teacher. She was Mrs. Dumas. She was a very formative person in my artistic career. She nurtured me, kind of brought me up, and she was the only class I got A's in at school, and all this stuff. So
Oh, okay. Because I was going to ask, along the way, did you have anyone, whether in high school or in college, who saw your potential and
her and her
encouraged
husband,
you?
uh, the two of them. Her husband was a computer science teacher, and she was the art teacher at the high school. And
Mhm,
after college, I went to her and I said, "Look, I can't get a job. I have no computer experience." And she said, "Well, my husband teaches computer science. He'll show you how to use Quark Express and Adobe Illustrator, and all, and how to use a Mac, and all that stuff." So I said, "Okay." So I went there, and every day I was there with him. He was teaching me on his lunch hour all this wonderful computer stuff, and I picked it up pretty quick. Um, and I eventually got a job. I got a job. My first job was at the Smithtown News in on Long Island, setting type for real estate ads. So I was on a
uh,
tiny Mac 2 Classic, and I was setting. I was doing all the real estate ads that you see in the back of like the Penny Saver and Newsday and stuff like that. So that was fun. Um, and I worked my way up. I got into an ad agencies there on Long Island. I eventually got to an award-winning agency. We won a bunch of awards. I became an art director there. I learned film and
mm,
TV production and print and all that stuff. Um, and I one day I came into the office and I hear these noises coming from this back room, the roars and shooting and all this stuff. And I was, somebody's
mhm,
movie back there. What is this? So I walked back, and one of the account execs is back there, and he had a PC. We were Mac based at the time, and this was like in the early '90s, so there weren't really many games out for Macintosh. There was Marathon and
mhm,
maybe a couple others, but the PC had all the cool games. So this was Doom, and when I
wow.
walked in, he was playing Doom, and the light bulb went off in my head, and I was like, I want to do that. Like I was mesmerized. It blew my mind instantly. So I was like, it's monsters, it's this, it's that. So I researched the company, its software, and I found this guy, John Romero, John Carmack. These guys are in their 20s. They're driving Ferraris, and they're souping up their Ferraris and turbocharging them, doing all this crazy stuff. And it just looked like so much fun. So my wife and I, we were in New York. She was an occupational therapist. We just got married and
Mm,
applied. I found out John Romero, one of the guys at id Software, was leaving. He was one of the founders and one of the creators of Doom. He was leaving and starting a company in Dallas, Texas called Ion Storm. So I applied, and it took about 6 months, but I eventually got in. And my wife and I think we're making a decent living in New York. For that time, it was about 120,000 between the two of us, and they had offered me about 50K to come down and work at Iron Storm. So we had
oh, wow.
just got married. I said, Cher, do you want to do this? And she looked at me and she was like, well, what do you want to do it? And I said, yeah, I'd like to try. This is this technology. It's really exciting, and
Mm,
so we moved down to Dallas, and
wow.
that was a great experience. I mean, it was a great experience. It was a horrible experience. I
Mm,
worked on a game called Daikatana, which is probably the most critically panned game of all time. It was relentless, the criticism of that game. About
wow.
a month after I got down there, the original team quit, and we just had a bunch of stragglers and people really with not a lot of experience making it, or I shouldn't say that, not a lot of experience shipping games, right? So shipping was the problem, and
Mm,
we did what was called a death march. It was 7 days a week, like 16-hour days, 18-hour days.
wow.
It was crazy. People sleeping under the desks and stuff. And we did that for probably 2 years, a year and a half, something like that. It was wild. Um,
And
so
when you joined that company, did you join as art director?
no, no, I joined that company as an artist, and then I became a lead artist. I joined it as an artist on Anachronox, which was Tom Hall's company. Then the Daikatana team quit, and I got shoved over there, and so I worked on Daikatana. I like John Romero; he was like one of my heroes. So
Mm,
I wanted to work for him. I was just surprised
mhm,
that we weren't doing a Doom type game. But it would have been a cool game. I mean, if that original team had stayed, that game would have
mm,
been killer. Yeah,
mm,
it was amazing. Um, so anyway, I did that for a while, and the game shipped and it didn't do very well. It kind of did mediocre. It was critically panned, and the fans hated it. It was buggy, so it wasn't a great game out the gate. And then Warren Spector in Austin did Deus Ex, which was successful. That was a great game. And Tom Hall did Anachronox, which was a moderate success, I guess, but it wasn't enough to keep the company open. So they
Mm,
folded. One of the last days I was there, I got a call from a headhunter, and they said, "Hey, you want to? Can you come to North Carolina? We want to interview you." I had been working at Ironstorm with Unreal Warfare technology, so this was the precursor to Gears of War. So we fixed Unreal Warfare technology. And I was learning the editor, and I was learning the lighting system, and and all that stuff. And I was doing something different. I was at the time I was in 3D apps, and I was rendering lighting and baking lighting into the textures. So
mm,
when I put that in Unreal, the fidelity was so high, it was so clear and crisp that it looked like the levels were lit, like a
mm,
full on high poly 3D cinematic asset, right? They looked
mhm,
incredible. So Tim Sweeney saw that and he was like, wow, this is wild. How are you doing this? And I said, I'm cheating. I'm doing this. And he said, well, come on in. So I interviewed at Epic, and at the time they were like 15 people. I think I was employee number 16, and I interviewed with everyone in the company solo. Like I would drive to lunch with some guy, I would drive back from lunch with
mhm,
somebody. I would go in somebody's office when we got back. We went to dinner. I'd drive with somebody different. So they all could get a feel for me. The team was so lean that if I didn't fit culturally with
mm.
them, they would have been like, you're gone.
Right.
So at the end of the night, that it was probably 8, 9 o'clock at night after dinner. Mark Rain called me in his office and he said, "You're hired." He said, "Here's your signing bonus. Here's your salary. Everybody's got a flat salary here, and this is what you make, and we get paid by bonuses. So once develop some seniority here, you'll get stock options, you'll get
Mm,
bonuses, stuff. That's how you make your real money." I said, "Okay, cool," and I did, and it was great. The ride was amazing. Um, I loved everything about that time. The people I worked with, the exciting challenges, the technology. We were just riding the cusp of advanced technology at the time. I mean, Unreal
mm.
Engine was probably five years ahead of everybody else when Gears of War came out. It was it
Wow.
was it was amazing. Um,
And and when you went to Epic Games first, you went in as a lead artist and then
When
worked
I went
up
to
to
Epic, I went as an artist. I was a CG artist, a computer artist. I was doing 3D modeling. I was doing textures and skins and UV mapping and level design and lighting and things like that. But I didn't have a team. They were so lean. You had to be a jack of all trades. Everybody had to do like 2 or 3 jobs because we were just 16 people, right? So when I got on board, they had just shipped Unreal Tournament and they were working on a PS2 port of UT and Unreal Warfare, which was like a battlefield type game. It was two teams, battlefield, order and chaos, and it was kind of cool. But that eventually developed into Gears of War. Once Jerry O'Flaherty came on board, and he put his cinema. He's a film director also, and he put his kind of cinematic eye on that game. And
Mm,
roadie run camera and things like that. And that's what really made that game sing, the cinematics and all that stuff.
yeah.
It came to life. And so we had all these amazing cinematics, um, but no gameplay. And Lee Perry hired me at Ion Storm, and I returned the favor and got him hired on at Epic Games. He was an amazing 3D artist, amazing art director, amazing lead artist, an amazing game designer and developer. So he kind of turned things around when he was there. He worked with this guy Ray Davis and Mike Capps, and they developed a cover system for Gears, and
Mhm.
and that kind of set the gameplay, and it was amazing. Along with Cliff Blazinski, of course, the lead designer, um, who's another amazing guy. So yeah, it was. Look, the times were great. It was so fun. We were rock stars, and I love it. I loved working with those people again, and I do it again in a heartbeat. It was amazing.
What what I find fascinating about what you've described as your journey, it sounded like what, and I'm surprised that at FIT you hadn't done any work on a computer yet. But I guess so
I
the graphic
mean,
designing.
Yeah, it was the late '80s when I was at FIT, and computers were just becoming a thing, kind of. They had the little Macs out and stuff, the classics, but I didn't. Yeah, I didn't touch it. I didn't touch a
So
computer.
was graphic design back then still all by hand? It was just manual.
Yeah, you were like cutting out text, and you were photographing. You had the Lucy machine, and you would photograph it, cut it out, and typeset. Set the type on a board, and do these kind of mechanical boards, right? And then you take a photo of that, and that would be your ad, and you'd send that off to publications. Um, yeah, it was.
Very, very analog.
Yes, very analog, very very
I
annoying.
think
Yeah, yeah.
I,
Look, it was fun at the time, right? For a guy with like ADHD, it was something to concentrate on, and I just love the mechanisms of all of it. And I get off on like the relationship, like kerning, like the relationship of text to itself, right? Like a
mm,
T and an H, and like what
mm,
the spatial, the negative space between them is, and how that all sets and looks right. I love that stuff, and that is something I was taught by a guy named Martin Solomon at FIT, who was an amazing typographer with like Saul Bass and these all these famous guys back in the '70s and '60s. And I really grew an appreciation for it. And what that did was it kind of cascaded out into everything I did, right? Because I learned that relationship and how things looked right visually,
mm,
I could then take that and apply it to a video game, to a
mm.
level, to lighting in a level, to a 3D character, to anything artistic.
How
It just
did you go?
my eye.
Did I remember you telling me that when you first got started, all you had were drawings of monsters,
Yeah, yeah,
and
yeah.
so is that what you used to get into FIT? Was that your portfolio? Just
Well, I
drawing?
had other things too. I was, I had my monster stuff was so I was like, I wanted to be a special effects guy. I just had no idea how to go get into Hollywood or anything
Mm,
like that. So I would,
mm.
I have every Fangora issue right now. I have them all, whatever, in storage, but, I love them, and I love looking through them from time to time. I loved them as a kid, right? I just loved the art of special effects, the practical effects of everything. That fed my monster stuff and all that. But yeah, it monster. So way back when I saw when I was like this might have been before Star Wars. When I was really young, there was a program on TV called In Search of with Leonard Nimoy, and it was a really creepy like cryptozoology program. You can still find it on YouTube, all the episodes.
Wow,
He
I
would
haven't heard of it. That sounds amazing.
Yeah, he's kind of like the early like George Norrie and like those guys on radio, with it's all this kind of like cryptids and paranormal stuff, and he would go around and like explore all these things. And there was one episode called In Search of Dracula. And he went to Dracula's castle and he would talk about his voice was so creepy. And they had real grainy kind of 16 millimeter footage of Dracula's castle and stuff. But they would intercut it with the original 1922 silent film Nosferatu. And
Mm.
they would show him that shadow creeping up the stairs, and they would show him in the doorway, like and raising up in the coffin. And as a kid, that set my brain on fire. And I didn't sleep for probably a month after that. It scared the living shit out of me. That shadow creeping up the stairs, that's all I could picture at night was that. So that kind of set me on, and I don't know why. You would think a kid that got scared of that stuff would gravitate away from that and never look at it again, but I immersed
Mm.
myself in it, and I would draw it, I would experience it, I would think about it, and then I'd even get like skull model kits and clay and like model stuff on top of that, and make these cut off heads and all this kind of gory stuff, and I loved all that stuff. But again, I had no idea how to really get into the industry and do that, so
Mm.
I went advertising graphic design first, which gave me an amazing foundation of design and a really particular eye.
Mm.
I worked for these other two guys, Don Donowdy and Bill Munch, at this ad agency on Long Island. That's where I won the most awards for my stuff,
Mm.
for our stuff. Um, but they again they so I was kind of a lump of coal at that point, and Don, who was the
Mm.
creative director, like crafted me into a diamond. I think like his eye was so particular and so amazing that I just learned so much from those guys.
Mm.
Bill was a copywriter, so I learned a lot about writing from him. And Don was just an amazing visual guy. So and that was the first. I think I used Photoshop for the first time at that shop, and it was like using the lasso tool and all this kind of
Yeah.
rudimentary stuff that was so hard for me to get my head around. And now it's like second. It's like driving a car now. It's just you're in Photoshop zipping around and
Hmm.
the stuff. So
And when you went to the first game company, did you had to learn on the job how to use the tools,
yeah,
right?
yeah. So you're always learning on the job. That's another like one of my superpowers. I think I'm a tinkerer, right? So one of the other things I would do as a kid, I did all this stuff as a kid, but one of the other things I would, because I had so much time, uh, is I would take apart things, right? I would take apart
Mm.
old TVs, radios, and tinker with them, and make robots, and make Star Wars ships that like out of cardboard boxes, and I'd glue like circuit boards to the sides, and do all this stuff. Um, so I was just kind of really creative with everything, and my imagination just came in. And but being able to tinker with technology, once I got to a game studio, they were like, "Hey, here's this cool toy to play with, this engine, uh, and you can do all these things with it. You can put 3D in it, you can make things move around in it, you can build levels with it and whole environments and light them." And that was super exciting to me, and super. I love the challenge, right? The challenge, and to be able to tinker with the technology. You know, as an artist, it was frustrating because you couldn't really achieve your vision. You would do a lot, so I was like always trying to cheat and push the envelope and render all my stuff first, put it in the engine after, and try to do that, but it just didn't. It didn't jive right. It always looked kind of fake or whatever. But it was an interesting time, and I love it's the tinkering is what I love about stuff like figuring things out. That's part of my artistic process too.
Yeah, I appreciate that you keep going back to who you were as a child. I mean, you said a couple of things that were really interesting. That I mean, you said you were always kind of weird, like having ADHD, and uh, did you say being compulsive or obsessive compulsive?
Yeah, just some
Yeah.
compulsive,
Well,
probably on the spectrum somewhere, and like all that stuff.
well, I think what I'm getting at is, do you think you were just somehow follow, like it was your nature that led you on your path, right? Like you always had an interest in tinkering with things. You
Yeah, I think there's a innate curiosity there, and my imagination, right? I have a very vivid imagination. I have photographic memory. I can remember every detail about everything I've ever seen, but I can't remember names or dates or numbers or anything like that. I can just remember the imagery. I can tell you exactly what things looked like, how they smelled, how they felt, but I can't tell you specific numbers or dates or names.
right,
That's kind of how it works. But yeah, it's all just that tinkering, that imagination. How do I like to tinker, and then I have this imagination, so it's like, hey, let's take this thing apart and figure out how to do it in a new way. Oh, everyone's using it like this, what if I did this, right? And I would
mhm,
just try to spitball and iterate and iterate and iterate, and get to where I wanted to be that way.
well,
I'm a big proponent of my artistic process varies a lot. I rarely plan something out. I'm kind of, and I said this to the Epic artists one time, and they had a shit bit, but I said, look, I'm order through chaos, right? I'm the guy that looks at clouds and pulls shapes out. I throw a lump of clay down and I pull out what it is on the fly. I don't have a preconceived notion of what it's going to be. I scribble on a painting, right? And look at what shapes come out, and then I refine those and pull the creature or pull the subject out of that painting. That's kind of how I create art. And when AI came on board with generative AI, it's kind of a roulette wheel, and I took to it kind of like a fish with to water, because it's a very similar process. It's like looking at the clouds and pulling out shapes. In the beginning anyway. Now you can control it much more, and it's much more of a proper artistic process, I think. But that's what I did, and I believe in happy accidents, and I've gotten really good at looking for happy accidents. There are some things that you can't, like film and making film and scripts, and you have to plan that stuff because there's so much money involved and there's so much on the line.
Yeah,
Even games to a certain extent, they
yeah.
must be planned. Um, but if you really want to generate something new, I think there's definitely a process with this order versus chaos mentality that gives you some happy accidents that will yield something special at some point. I think so.
So we're definitely going to get to what you're doing
Sure.
now, and we'll talk about that a little later. We'll get back to AI,
Okay.
but I did one more, I guess, in this line about your artistic process. So when you're coming up with a monster or you're creating or whatever character you're creating, you're not seeing it in your head. You're pulling it out
I
almost.
have an idea of what it should look like in my head.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I can the visual is there.
Okay.
As I go, that changes. Like if I'm doing this kind of abstract kind of art creation, um, it'll change. I'll be like, oh, that's interesting. I'll see that accident that happens, right? If I'm painting something and I'm just scribbling, I have a general idea of what I want. It's got to be this
Mm.
ogre thing with this eyeball popping out and da da da. And I'll go there, and then as I'm going, it'll be like, oh, that looks cool. That brushstroke over there did something. That maybe he's got a hump on his back, or maybe he's got a horn there, or maybe it's this, maybe it's that. And I'll start to chase those things as well, and refine the image and refine my thought about the image um, just on the fly.
And one last question, getting back to I guess the happy accent of going from analog to, let's say, computer technology, right? You left FIT, your education was totally like analog, do things by hand. You're applying to ad agencies and they're all telling you like, all right, but you need to use a computer, and you hadn't learned a computer by then. And so it was your so that, I guess, let's say, happy accident introduced you to the world of computer technology, and then the merge between art and computer, right?
Yeah. And then so I learned the Mac, and I was on the Mac, and I got proficient with it. And then the guys that made Doom, id Software, came out with a game called Quake, and that was before I went to Ion Storm. So that was the real game changer. When I got in
Mm.
and played Quake, and I couldn't believe it. And then I saved up, and I think I got a Pentium 75 PC with a 4 MB Voodoo card, and that was the shit, right? That was like that at the time. That was it, man. So I could play Quake with this GL mod, and that smoothed all the textures out and made everything look amazing and 3D, and like I was lost in it. And then I got all the Quake editors and the modelers and all this stuff, and I started to mod the characters. I started to mod the levels, and I would work advertising probably from like I'd go in at like 7 or 8 in the morning, and I'd come home at like 8 at night. I'd do maybe some freelance work at night for some other clients I had in advertising.
Mhm.
And then I would hop on the computer about 11, 12 o'clock, and I'd mod till like 3 in the morning, 4 in the morning, and then get up and do it again like every day.
Right.
And couldn't care. I was just like, this is great. I love it. And then, so the Quake stuff is what I started to send to the Epic guys. And that's kind of how I got into the 3D stuff and the game world and modding games and all that stuff. I joined a mod team. I joined these guys that were modding Quake, creating like a
Mhm.
post-apocalyptic Quake mod, and, uh, and I took some of that stuff as my portfolio, sent it over to Ion Storm.
Okay, and that's what you used to get in, and
Yeah,
because you saw Doom, and you're like, "This is what I want to do," and so you
exactly.
started learning
Yeah,
how to.
yeah.
When you weren't working, you were home learning how to do
Yeah,
it.
and that's kind of my MO, right? So, not to jump ahead, but in
Yeah,
filmmaking, when I
yeah.
retired from Epic, I wanted to do films, and so what I did was I immersed myself in film. How do you make films? How do you write a script? How do you do this?
Mhm.
That? Oh, and by the way, let's make a short film and let's
Yes.
shoot on real film, right?
Yeah.
So I want to immerse myself in the process and learn everything about it, and make mistakes early, make a lot of mistakes early, make them fast, get over them, learn from them, and move on, and make more and iterate and more. Um, so that was, looking back, the Quake, and that I've done that with everything in my life. I kind of
Mm.
immerse myself in stuff from advertising to Ion Storm, from Ion Storm to Epic Games, from Epic Games to film. Now it's all the same process. It was, hey, I
Yeah.
want to do this. How do I do that? Well, I'm going to talk to everybody I know about it. I'm going to immerse myself in the technology and learn as much as I can about it. And then I'm going to have my own thoughts on it, and I'm going to mix all those together, and I'm going to just do it.
Okay, so yeah, so you brought us here, so and this is perfect. So let's start talking about your next chapter as an artist. So you retired from Epic Games maybe a couple of years ago, I think, right?
Yeah,
Wasn't that
2022.
long ago.
Yeah, 2022.
2022, right? So about 4 years ago, and I know now, and we should say you're. I know because I know you. I know you're a film lover and a film buff, you know quite a bit about films. Whenever we've talked about films, you know tons of movies, right? And so you've always been a film lover, and like you said, Star Wars is what inspired you to become an artist. So now you're learning about films. So take us through, and I know you directed a short 77.
Sure.
And you're trying to develop features and you're doing some really interesting stuff with AI because you're also exploring new technologies while you're learning the traditional analog stuff about film,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
So tell us about what why film for you, and what you're excited about, and a little bit about what you're doing with AI.
So to me, film is storytelling. It's visual storytelling, right? And at its finest. And I'm a purist. I love the films I grew up with. Um, so it's Star Wars, Raiders of the Lost Ark, Jaws. You know,
Hmm.
but then there's particular like horror films that I love too, and most of those settled in the '70s, maybe some of the early '80s stuff. But those I think are the best for me because they were mostly practical, none of the digital nonsense, none of the weird tricks. They had to do less with more with less. Um,
Hmm.
the lighting is sterile and it's just stark and environmental, and nothing's really crafted. It's all kind of gritty and dirty. Films like Taxi Driver, Rosemary's Baby is my absolute favorite movie.
Hmm.
I love like every shot in that movie. um,
Hmm.
and the way that the story is told, as well, is just so creepy. There's stuff like The Changeling with George C. Scott that I love. Let's Scare Jessica to Death. These are like more obscure ones, but there's a craft there that's just I think lost, and part of it's kind of the changing audience today, and digital and phone, and your attention span is very limited now on the younger generation, and they couldn't sit through movies like that anymore, and that's kind of a shame.
Right.
So I kind of bemoan that stuff a little bit,
Yeah.
but it is what it is, and the world's changing, and that's great. So we'll move on. So what I'd like to do is create a modern aesthetic with pacing and sound design and things like that, but have a more classic filmic approach to my movies. I tried to prove that out with 77, shot on Panavision, 35 millimeter, all that stuff, and probably won't do that again. I realized the limitations of it, right? Like, oh,
Yeah.
we shot in a really dusty old house, and they were constantly, you do a take, and you'd have to check the gate, right, to make sure
Yep.
there's no hairs or
Right.
dust and crap gets in the camera. And
Right.
in this house, it was dusty and dirty and dingy, and there was dust everywhere. And so every like 3 or 4 takes, it was a bad gate, right? So we'd have to retake it, and it was like a perfect shot, and you lost it because of this. There's some stupid hair in the thing. So that was an education.
Yeah.
I think digital and the cameras are very cumbersome. So my thing is, I love the beauty of film. Film feels a lot more organic to me. I have a very trained eye with digital effects and my background in art and all that stuff. So I can tell the difference
Mhm.
between film and digital. If it's shot digitally, I
Mhm.
can instantly tell. And there's just something, even if you put grain in it, even if you fake it and da da da, there's something just more sterile about it. It doesn't behave the way film does, right? When you
Yeah.
develop that emulsion, there is something there that creates these beautiful, happy accidents in the
Sure.
background and the way the film behaves. That's different. It's just
Yeah.
different, and I happen to love that. But modern audiences don't care or know the difference,
Right.
so that's fine. So we'll deal with that. But I'll probably shoot digital next one. It's just the cameras are lighter. You can get it and do a lot more interesting things with them, and
Yeah.
stuff like that. So um, I'm excited about it. I'm excited about the career. I did the same thing I did with games. I got out of Epic and I wrote a script. I was like, let's immerse myself in this. I learned about cameras and camera technology. I talked to everybody. Somebody got me on the phone with Tyrese Gibson. I've talked to David Arquette. I've talked to
Mhm.
I can't even remember. There's just a slew of other people, producers, directors, everybody I could talk to. I would call and talk to them about the process of making film. What do I
Mhm.
need? What do I do? How do you do it? What are you on set? What are you doing? Da da da. So I did this all before I ever stepped on a set. Um, and I formed my own opinions on what they told me, basically. So that was all good. And then the technology. I had friends like my friend Mike Canzanero runs a studio there on 28th Street in Manhattan. So he took me out. And he showed me probably $1 million worth of camera equipment downtown somewhere. We got to test out lenses. We got to test out
Mhm.
different boxes. All that stuff, and that was a really great education. I got to see like stuff that Cameron shot Aliens on, stuff they shot Raiders on. We got to look through all these different lenses from vintage to modern, and
Wonderful.
the difference, see how they behave, see how the light flares in the lenses, and
Mhm.
it's wonderful stuff. So that was
Cool.
really. Um,
Very cool.
so I do that with everything, and again, and I just immerse myself in it, and then learn the craft and learn the tools of the craft, basically, and then apply my own logic to it.
Mhm.
That's kind of what I like to do.
And so now you're also exploring creating shorts. I think you're just trying to learn how to use AI within the filmic process. Can you talk about what you've been doing with AI and
Yeah, so I've been
your
messing
experience?
around with AI. So I'm a film purist. So my AI, I have a separate company for AI. I think AI is valuable tool for artists. I think it's going to be a valuable tool for filmmakers. Um, I think it's going to allow, there's all this doom and gloom about replacing humans and all this stuff. And maybe it'll happen. I don't know. But the way I think about it in the short term is it'll be a great tool to get these VFX shops from working on one film to maybe working on 10 films. And
Mhm.
maybe you get some better results with certain things. And it's a
Mhm.
bit unruly right now. It's a bit hard to control. There are more tools being made that helps it to be more of an art driven process than an AI
Mhm.
driven process, which is
Mhm.
great, more of a human driven process, right? Like I have an idea, I'm going to mold this thing to my will rather than I'm going to pull this roulette wheel and see what I get, right? So there are,
Yeah.
there are tools coming online that are doing that. I think what will happen, in the future is somebody will take a VFX tool like Blender per se or something. I mean, I know they already have AI in there, but like some of this generative stuff, and it'll just be integrated with these tools, either editing tools or VFX production tools like Houdini or whatever. Like you'll just get this stuff in there, and you'll be able to change outfits on people and languages and lip sync and adjust your shots, right? Like turn the camera in certain shots, and it'll be invaluable because as a filmmaker, you've got a certain amount of time on set, got a certain amount of time to get your shots and tell your story, and inevitably you're back in the editing booth going, oh shit, I missed that one, or I need this shot, or I need a close up
Mhm.
here. And instead of having to spend billions, or millions on a reshoots and
Mhm.
whatever, or thousands,
Yeah.
you pop up the old AI thing and you do your thing, So um, yeah, that's kind of where I see things happening. But as a film purist, I would prefer to shoot everything on film if I could. It's just going to get
Mhm.
it's expensive and cumbersome, and I get it. But um, I will. I love the process of filmmaking. So I love the actors and that kind of like play theatrical aspect of it is something that AI can never do, right? You can or I don't think you can. It'll mimic it, right? You'll be able to
Mm,
mimic it, but people can tell even with AI. You can kind of even how good it is now. You
yeah,
can tell how sterile kind of that the interactions are with
yeah,
real humans and things like
yeah,
that. That's why 3D has never been able to surpass that uncanny valley. I think AI will get there at some point. There's some things that fool my eye pretty well, but
hmm,
I haven't really seen a conversation between two people or a group of people yet that has convinced me. So
yeah,
it's things like that there's all these little subtle nuances of people and the hair when they flick their hair, and there's little
hmm,
tells that people give that the AI just is not. It's still like some of the characters won't blink, and some of this happens and that happens. The muscularity under the skin isn't quite right, things like that. So, but it's getting there, and we've they've come a long way in such a short period of time. In another 2 years, I think it's going to be unbelievable. Yeah. So.
awesome, awesome. So I guess my last question is, what advice would you have for a young artist coming up, trying to break into their career of choice? Do you have any words of wisdom?
Yes, I think so. There's a I forget what this quote. I always forget this quote. There's a Japanese quote that's about the professional mind is a closed mind. Be like a child, right?
Mm,
So a child is curious about everything. They tinker with everything. The professional is smarter than a child, smarter in quotes, but their mind they think they know everything, and
mm,
they're a lot of them are unwilling to learn new things, right? So
mm,
always be willing to learn. Don't close your mind off to AI as an ideological knee jerk, right? Like, oh, it's so bad. It's against humanity. It's this, it's that. You're just doing yourself a disservice. It's not going anywhere. Check it out, learn it, uh, explore it, and then throw it away if you want. But at least allow yourself to look at it and be curious about it, and try to apply it to some of the things that you do. It'll surprise you in certain ways. The other end of that spectrum is learn traditional art, study the masters, learn color theory, learn typography, learn graphic design, sculpt, paint, try different mediums, right? You will be a more well-rounded artist. It will teach you everything. Even if you're going to be a digital artist, you need to know all the basics, right? You just have to
mhm,
know. At Epic Games, uh, I don't know, maybe 10 years ago, I had set up an art studio there. I wanted the artists to get off the computers
mhm,
and get into some tangible things. So we would bring in
mhm,
guest sculptors, we'd bring in guest painters, and we had a special room with easels and tables and all this wonderful stuff to get hands on and actually craft something outside of digital, right? Feel that form in real time, and you know get yourself get those creative juices flowing. So I think that's super valuable. And don't be discouraged. That's the other thing. Like,
yeah,
do not be discouraged. Just keep going. And if you are passionate about something, don't let anyone tell you that you can't do it. Because I'm living proof that you can. The little kid drawing monsters and is scared of his own shadow. Now I'm traveling all over. I'm meeting all these people. I'm doing all this crazy stuff, and and I'm having the time of my life. It's great. So yeah, don't let people discourage you. Most of them don't know what they're talking about, and misery loves company, right?
mm,
Most of them are miserable, and
yeah.
you know, ignore them and just do your thing. Yeah.
Awesome. Awesome. Wow. Thank you, Chris. This was great.
Yeah. No,
You
great.
inspired me. This was awesome.
Thank you. Yeah. Thanks so much.
Thank
Yeah. I'm
you.
happy to do it.
Yeah. Thanks for being on here.
All right.
All right. Thank you for joining us.